When I say film cinematic universe, I'm sure the first thing that you think of is probably the Marvel universe, the MCU, or possibly the Conjuring universe, which I covered a few weeks ago. But did you know that there was a film universe that went way before either one of those? That's right, we're talking about the HCU, the Henenlotter Cinematic Universe. We first opened a basket back in 1982 with the original basket case. And we're in a bad part of New York as young Dwayne here checks into a hotel with a big wicker basket. Whatever's in there is something that he feeds, and we spot some paperwork dated 1959 and 1970, and he befriends a prostitute neighbor and a doctor's secretary. The thing in the basket is this guy, Belial, who can tear off doors and cling to walls, and he kills the doctor and then stop motion walks around the room. You know, you can laugh, but it looks better than about 90% of CGI monsters nowadays. Dwayne starts dating Sharon and confesses that Belial is his deformed brother, and they're conjoined twins who were separated when they were younger. This flashback tells us they were separated at age 12, and that was where the paperwork came from 1970, and since Dwayne is at least 21 being served alcohol, we're in at least 1979 here. So they're killing the doctors that separated them, and then he goes to visit the last one. There's a sticker up about the 1980 Olympics, so we're post-80, and they kill the last doctor. When Dwayne and Sharon fall in love, Belial gets jealous and attacks her and kills her. Dwayne and Belial fight, and... Ooh. That looks really uncomfortable. They accidentally fall out the window and Belial strangles Dwayne while trying to save him, and then they both fall to their death. We jump now to 1988's Brain Damage, Henenlotter's next film. We meet young Brian and his girlfriend, and there's a poster on the wall for a concert from '87, so we're at least past that. Brian's neighbor looks awful familiar, and one night he has a really spectacular trip, and then he meets this worm thing. His name is Elmer, and he injects a powerful hallucinogenic into your brain. And then there's this calendar up here with only 28 days, so it's February 1987, so it's looking like that's our year here. And Elmer kills the security guard and eats his brain. The trips get stronger, more people get eaten. We learn that Elmer is centuries old, and Brian decides to go cold turkey. His withdrawals are, well, they're pretty crazy, so he gives in, and they almost eat this massive guy in the shower. Remember him. And then they eat this guy sitting on the toilet reading Dead World. I used to have that whole series. While on the subway, a familiar-looking guy in a basket come on board, so it's apparent that Dwayne and Belial survived their fall, and Elmer kills Brian's girlfriend, and this newspaper shows a date of 1987, so that's confirmed. And Elmer's previous owners try to reclaim him, which ends up with them getting eaten, Elmer getting crushed, and Brian getting an accidental overdose. It drives him insane, so he shoots himself, but, well, it doesn't quite work. 2 years later, in 1990, we finally get Basket Case 2, which picks up right where the last one left off, and the brothers survive their fall. And Casey pops in, although she looks quite a bit older, and from people's clothing, it looks like it's meant to be in the current year. Belial looks a lot better, and the pair escape, getting picked up by a pair of women. They introduce the brothers to their adopted family, a group of also deformed people, including Eve. A couple of reporters are looking for them, and they talk about searching for the brothers for such a long time, and there's no more leads, so it looks like we're now sometime after the ending of the first one. And this lady has Jolt Cola on her desk, so we're post-1985, the year that that drink was released. But it kind of seems like Dwayne and Belial haven't been in the house for a full 10 years, and when Dwayne confronts Belial, he tells them that the relationship has been different the past couple of months. So that kind of confirms it for me. This film is set in an alternate timeline than the first film, and the events take place in 1990, with the events of the previous film taking place months earlier, possibly extending back into '89. Just forgive the clothing and the technology, and this makes the boy running free back in 1987, allowing him to meet Brian on the subway. When things get tough, Dr. Pretorius gets involved, but he turns out to be such easy prey. They kill the reporter, and Belial and Eve get it on while Susan reveals to Dwayne that she's been pregnant for 6 years and her mutant baby lives in her belly. He snaps and accidentally kills her, and then stitches himself and Belial back together with a pair of knitting needles. In that same year, Henenlotter also released Frankenhooker, which tells of young Jeffrey Franken, whose fiancée dies in a tragic lawnmower accident. His mother is Mary Hartman, and he's saved Elizabeth's head and plans to bring her back. While driving through New York, he passes a theater playing the Bond flick License to Kill, Turner and Hooch, and Batman, all of which came out in 1989, giving us our date. And when he's enlisted hookers, he comes across this big guy from The Shower and Brain Damage. It's possible that he's a different character, but if the films are connected, let's just say it's the same guy, and he's a pimp and a drug dealer. And Bonnie shows up, advocating legal prostitution, creating another link to the full series. And Jeffrey creates super crack, and then tries to find the perfect assortment of body parts, and it was hard, really hard to find clips from this scene to show you. The girls get the drugs and smoke them, which causes them all to explode in glorious fashion. He pieces them together, and quicker than you could say, she's alive, alive, Frankenhooker is born. She goes looking for Johns, who also explode, and she generally creates a scene.
Ooh, honey, look at this thing.
The sideshow guy from Basket Case 2 shows up, but obviously a different character, and Jeffrey restores Elizabeth's memory, but Zorro shows up and cuts off his head. But then he's killed by the reanimated parts of all the rest of the hookers. It's gross and awesome. Elizabeth then reanimated Jeffrey, but since his formula only works on women, well, he's not quite the man he used to be. And Henenlotter ends his second movie in a row with a character saying, "We're together again." Side note, this movie would only be half as enjoyable without the amazing James Lorenz. How he didn't achieve greater stardom is beyond me. 1 year later, in 1991, Basket Case 3, The Progeny, was released, and it picks up right where Part 2 leaves off. Then we see that the brothers have been separated, and Granny Ruth says that it happened several months ago, so it's either later in 1990 or possibly early 91. Eve is pregnant, and the monster effects are noticeably, well, cheaper. They head to the Deep South for Eve to give birth, and there's musical numbers. We meet Ruth's mutated son, and Eve gives birth to 12 little mutants, and Dwayne is arrested. His wanted sheet gives his birth as 1961, so they were separated in 1973 at age 12, which doesn't exactly clear up when the first film took place, as we're now assuming that Dwayne was older than we thought in that one, and it took place in 1989 when Dwayne was 28, and he'd be about 30 here. And judging from this Cosmopolitan cover, which was from May 1991, yes, I actually researched that. We're in 1991. Local police shoot Eve, kidnap the babies, so Belial gets some ridiculous revenge in all manner of elaborate ways. But he gets shot, and Bonnie shows up in a fast food restaurant, so she's either chosen a new career, or this is more likely a different character. Belial gets a mecha suit for his showdown with the sheriff, but the kids get the win, and it ends with Granny Ruth taking the whole clan public.
Have a nice day.
So there you have it. It's 5 movies that, yeah, they don't tie together. It's not really a cinematic universe. I'm sure that the little cameos and nods to the other films were just meant as just that, little nods. They do tie together, I guess, somewhat well. The biggest problem is the time jump between the first and second Basket Case movies. But other than that, you really ought to watch all of these movies. They're all great. Basket Case 3 is a little iffy, but it's still fun. I enjoyed them. Brain Damage, I think, is a masterpiece. I really get a kick out of Frankenhooker, especially because of James Lorenz. And, Basket Case movies are just a really good time. So check them out. That's about it for this week's video. Let me know what you thought of it down in the comment below. Also, please like and subscribe. You know, all those good stuff that you normally do, and also the Patreon page. Here it is. You always see it. Do you ever go to it? Maybe you should go to it. Maybe you should support this channel. These guys do. So I want to thank them very, very, very much. And in the meantime, I'll see you next week for another great video. Bye, guys.